Again, thanks, guys. I appreciate you joining. We'll just get into. Do you want to give a little bit of background about yourselves?
Born and raised in Atlanta, went to University of Georgia for college. A business major, started off my first job in college was selling educational books door to door, 80 hours a week, straight commission. So kind of dove right into sales and entrepreneurship and then worked with that company. It's a 160-year-old internship company and worked with them all through college and built a sales organization and really learned a lot about myself and sales and working with people. Met my wife through that program, and then we got married, moved to Jacksonville. So we've been here for about 18 years now. And
Thanks.
after college, was in insurance for about 14 years, and then what was it, 2014, got into broker and domains, just kind of part time while I was still in the insurance business, and just really loved everything about the industry, and had been bought a few homes and fixed them up and rented them out. So I really liked the idea of real estate. But when I heard about domains, I was like, this is phenomenal. And we just had our third kid. And so I was really looking for something I could do from home. And the business started to grow. And then 2018 had a really big sale that helped, really propel me into going full time. So 2020 launched full time. And so I've been doing brokerage full time since then. And then funny enough, we were actually at a Rick Schwartz domain get together in Asheville. And I knew Michael, we had done a couple of deals together because he was working at another broker firm. And so we connected there at Rick's conference, and Michael was looking for a change and said, hey, what if I were to come work with you? And I said, well, I'm not looking to hire, but let's figure it out. So it's been a phenomenal partnership with Michael here, since then. And been growing the team since then. Maureen's been with us for a few years now, and then Tess has been working with us for almost a year now as well. And then we've got a few full-time researchers, so just continuing to grow the team and have fun brokering domain names.
I'm here in Denver, Colorado. I've been here my whole life. I lived in the mountains for a few years and then up in Fort Collins, but got a 2-year-old son here at home and a dog, and they're keeping us on our toes for sure. But yeah, my journey into the domain business, it was kind of a gradual progression. It started, I remember my second year of college, I took a course called online writing, and it wasn't a technical course, but we ended up learning HTML in that course. And I remember our professor, he told us, after we finished coding our personal little web pages, we uploaded them on the coloradostate.edu subdomain on their server. But he told us, if you want to code your own website at home, you're going to need to buy a domain name and upload the site on a domain. And so that was kind of the first light bulb moment for me. I remember a buddy of mine and we went home and we started looking at domains, and there was forums out there. So we jumped in the forums and we kind of started doing some flipping domains, just real light, just kind of as an experiment. But I knew there was something there. I kind of got sidetracked, with all the other distractions in college, and kind of let it go for a little while. Fast forward a few years, I was just coming out of kind of living the ski life up in Breckenridge, managing restaurants and bartending, and I had a little bit of money and I wanted to get back into the domain business. I came in eager to kind of just dive in. And so I started the blog called nametalent.com. And, currently it's still being published. Bob Hawks is carrying the torch on that. So I'm no longer running it, but it's still active. So great to see that Bob, who's a great guy, is writing on there periodically. After that, alongside with the blog, I started a local meetup here in Denver. It's called the Rocky Mountain Domain Conference, and that was from 2011 to 2013. So had met quite a few people in the industry, and was able to organize a couple nice events locally. Had some sponsors, and it went really well. And that was around the same time I started going to conferences. And I remember The first conference that I went to was DN Cruise, and I was just blown away by the character of people that I met there. A lot of them are still industry friends today, and we do business together. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of how I got started. And then, as my, investments grew in domains, I knew I wanted to kind of make it a full-time thing, and I wasn't living off my domain investment. So, I figured brokering would be the next logical step. And as Brian said, we met in Asheville and, have gone from there. I'm doing big things with Grip Brokerage for the last 5 years.
Great. What's your process for evaluating the value of a domain name? I think that's a piece that most domainers struggle with, whether either buying or selling. They don't want to overpay and they don't want to leave any money on the table. So, how do you guys go about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone in the domain industry knows that valuation is tricky. I always say there's no Kelly Blue Book for domains. So you can't, look at the name, what year it was registered, and is it a oneword.com, and there's a clear price for that. Every domain is totally unique, and it's hard to kind of put a price on them. When you're talking about like the ultra premium one word domains, you're already dealing with an asset that you and your client know that is extremely valuable. And so in pricing it, it is kind of important to look at some of the factors with the potential buyers, and understand their industry, their funding, their cash flow. Have they raised money recently, their leadership, and then if timing is always an issue. But like 99% of the domains that come across our desk, they're not those premium grails like that, but a lot of them are sellable inventory. And so, the price is going to matter more. The buyers for those types of names are more sensitive to the price. And so, yeah, putting a fair valuation on those is pretty key. And when Brian and I look at those types of names, whether it's a twoword.com or a oneword.org or something like that, we kind of draw from our experience in past sales and look at sales data, and we kind of put them into a ballpark range. And then once we have kind of a range figured out, it's important to look at the data a little closer, and we consider things like traffic, CPC, keyword search volume. And then what I think is really important is to look at what's going on with the similar names. So just for example, if you have a oneword.org that a client wants to sell, say $30,000 or something like that, if it kind of feels like a decent range, we want to look and see, okay, well, what's going on with the .io, the .net, the .ai, and the .co? These are all viable alternatives. And if, two or three of those names are on the market for less, it may not make sense to push that particular name out for $30,000. But on the flip side, that can go the other way. If all the other names are in use, the .com is in use, maybe the .io is $100,000, then we can better justify taking the name to market. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about drawing from experience, looking at data, and just trying to put a fair price on a name.
And sometimes even a good name isn't an investment worthy domain. How do you make that determination?
Yeah, I'll jump in here real quick, and then I know Michael probably have some thoughts as well. But as you know, when it comes to pricing, it's just so subjective in terms of. I think the big thing, especially with a lot of times we deal with domain owners that have had a domain for 30 years and they've got kind of this pie in the sky number, and it's more similar to art than it is real estate in terms of valuation, just because it is so subjective. And
Sure.
and really a lot of times they're tied to a valuation that maybe somebody told them a long time ago, hey, you could get, seven figures for this domain. But in all fairness, if they've had it for 30 years and the highest offer they've had is 100K, is it really worth $1 million? So our big thing is when we give somebody a price, it's not that they can't eventually get that. It's like, hey, what could it trade for today? Based on our experience of reaching out to end users and working with a ton of these companies on the buy side and understanding all those conversations they have internally, it's really just about helping them understand, hey, if we were to put this out to market, this is probably where the offers would be coming in. Is that something you'd be open to? And then, if a seller is looking to, cash out that asset, for a lot of them, that money is worth more to them in the bank than it is a domain that, could have some value long down the road that maybe somebody else might inherit that, doesn't know the valuations. They want to go ahead and trade it now. And that's where we can really help people the most if they're really serious about trying to sell it today.
For names that we're considering for brokerage, and what sets us apart from different brokers is that we do have a dedicated team of researchers and several brokers and sales assistants. So we do take on a whole variety of names, but they do need to have more than one end user. So if we're taking on a name that's two words, there's got to be multiple end users that might want to buy that. That way we can put it in front of multiple buyers, get some offers in, and then try and make a sale. And if it doesn't have any clear end users, maybe if it's a short domain, it should definitely at least have some liquidity value that's strong enough to produce a sale in the aftermarket.
As a professional brokerage firm, you guys, I know, have dealt with, I'm sure hundreds of high value domain names. What's the biggest challenge that you faced when working through those deals, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because I think the biggest thing that we have to do is bridge the gap, right? Because sellers have the number they want, buyers have their opening offer. And so 98% of the time, there's a very large gap in terms of what somebody's willing to sell it for and what somebody's willing to pay for it. So it's really all about education, right? And helping bring those offers together. And I think for us, we just want to get that next counter offer, right? Keep the conversation going, and really try and figure out as soon as we can, like, hey, is this something that's realistic? Are you guys, is the buyer really having serious conversations either internally, or do they come ready to buy and want to get a deal done? Are they stuck to a budget? Are we realistically going to be able to get that seller down? So it's really all about kind of managing that gap. And for us, it's, since everything we do is straight commission, it's all about kind of time, right? So we are continually staying on top of deals because we want to know, look, if this is going to happen, great, let's move towards it. If it's not, then let's figure out if we need to kick the can down the road and circle back. But so really just kind of helping bridge those gaps. So, that's just where a lot of the data and research and being on top of the market and knowing what's selling and what's not and what's moving, what's trending. And I think case studies of other similar companies that have been in similar situations. I mean, now we have so many clients that, have bought that perfect domain and have seen the benefits of it. So really helping buyers understand how, like, because a lot of them don't really know, unless you've owned a premium domain, you don't really know yet how beneficial it can be. So really helping buyers see that and understand that in order to move forward and pay the extra money now to get it in their possession and work with it.
And speaking of buyers and sellers, sales is really about relationships, right? So how do you develop those relationships with potential clients? And I know some of those relationships may be long term. Some of them you may need to develop fairly quickly because it's someone that you come across that's not a prior contact. How do you go about developing that relationship and building that rapport?
Yeah, I can say something. I know Michael will want to jump into this too, but really, I think, for me, it's always trying to figure out however they want to communicate. Some people, they want to get on the phone and they want to chat. That's great. Let's do that. Some people, hey, only let's do this through email. I've got to have all these other people on the email chain so they can see. Some people, if it's an individual entrepreneur, texting is great because you're getting immediate feedback and can either. So I think really just kind of being willing to be flexible and meet them where they're at. I mean, I think so many times people immediately want to jump on a phone call, but for me, there's still a little bit of discovery there in terms of like, okay, before we each take 30 minutes of each other's time, let's try and get a basis point. So usually for me personally, unless we're getting super close to a deal or if, it's necessary to have a conversation, I think it's good to be on the same page before you get on that call so that way you can make the most efficient use of your time and their time. So I think, for us, kind of our trademark is we're just quick to respond to people. And I think that really, especially in today's day and age, because people are so distracted with I've got 7 different emails and, that I've got to check each day. And you get text messaging, all these social media apps that we got to check and get comments on. So I think being on and being organized, good follow up, and just being quick to respond to people really shows that, hey, this person's a professional and they're gonna, take care of us, or that they're, serious about selling this domain or helping us acquire it.
And it's important to have a lot of different methods of communication. While it can be a little cumbersome, but I know I'm using WhatsApp a ton right now for texting and chatting with international buyers. Um, and then, just for buyers and sellers, I think it's always important, kind of piggybacking off what Brian said, is being quick to communicate and then kind of really hearing them out, kind of listening to their perspectives. Um, Even if it means sitting, maybe hearing a rant, spending 5 minutes kind of just like being someone's, punching bag even. Um, and then something that Brian and I have worked a lot on, and he's taught me really well, is that, you just can't let the emotions get the best of you. I mean, we've had so many deals that could have gone sideways, but just by keeping a level head, we've been able to push through and turn them into a win.
Yeah, that's interesting because I in my own experience and just following in the message forums and things I hear people reacting emotionally to um, offers or comments about their domain and what they're asking for it and that kills the deal instantly. There's no hope of continuing negotiations once you act emotionally towards that. But yeah, good to hear.
Right. And
So
as a broker, we're the cushion too. So when you have a buyer that's making a low offer and if the buyer and the seller were talking about that offer together, somebody might get upset or get emotional or make an offhand comment.
right.
But as a broker, we're here to kind of cushion and kind of guide them through, trying to get that best offer and get the deal done.
You guys have been in the industry for quite some time. There has been a lot of change over the years. How do you see the industry's evolved since you started, and where do you think that trajectory is leading in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for me personally, having seen what I do appreciate about the domain industry is, it took me a long time and a lot of work to be able to, gain credibility in the industry. It's an industry that, a lot of these domain owners, they don't just want to turn over the trust of their domain for just anybody to work it. And so I think that's one thing that I really appreciate that has held true with the industry is that it's really just a great group of people that understand the value of premium domains, and so it's really kind of like speaking another language with other people in the industry. I think what I saw in around the COVID time, where more businesses could do less things in person. I think we really saw a tipping point where, I mean, we did a lot of outbound before COVID, but it was like once COVID hit and people started to realize, okay, domain names and being able to sell our product online, our online brand is a really big deal. So I would say that was a pivotal moment in terms of end user companies. And there was a lot of cash that companies had through various things at that time. So they were investing them in domain names, which is great. I think another thing that we've seen too is the personal branding. More and more, I mean, you never would have thought 10 years ago that people could make a living making videos, right? And posting it on social media. And so people being able to monetize around a personal name and a brand. We've seen it in sports and obviously in business now as well. I think that's been huge for the industry where, you own your domain and your website outside of wherever your social media influence is. And so you're able to kind of have that direct relationship with your clients versus through an intermediary like a social media company. So I think those were some pivotal moments. And then I think where it's going is that, obviously there's a lot more options now for people in terms of domain names, but I think at the end of the day, as a company grows, their domain name just needs to get better. And so they're going to continue to upgrade. And I think there's, 4 or 5 extensions that have really stood the test of time. We've seen ups and downs with various extensions, but I think, as a core, that's healthy for an industry that of course, as the .com isn't available, there's a lot of other great options and other companies that have done successful in other extensions. So I think that's really healthy for the industry, um, and gives people other options. So those were just a few things, my take on it.
And there are cycles for buying and selling. There are seasonal names. There's industry cycles, ups and downs. Depending on the name, sometimes are probably better than others for buying and selling a domain name. How do you advise customers on how to go about that? Like when the right time is, or if the time isn't right, how do you help them understand that?
I think it's important to, and other brokers have mentioned this as well, as you kind of sell into these waves. So if crypto is going really, really crazy, and you're getting offers on your crypto domains, I mean, we've all seen the cycles in cryptocurrency. So it's good to sell while things are hot. And yeah, I just think it's really important also to kind of tuck away your best names if you don't need to sell them. Um, you can wait for a while. It's fine to do that as long as you have plenty of capital and you have a little bit of money tied up into a name. You might as well hang on to it until you're ready. If you're not ready to sell and you don't feel like the market's right, you shouldn't feel pressured to do so.
Talking about industries, are there specific industries that are more attracted to premium domains than others?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, there's
Go ahead,
demand
Michael.
for premium domains in every industry, especially at the highest levels. But I mean, we could share some industries that don't typically, spend a lot on money on domains, which would be things like kind of the traditional offline businesses like construction companies, agricultural, manufacturing. Law firms and attorneys aren't usually keen on upgrading domains for a lot of money. But I mean, that said, we're seeing domain interest grow across all the different industries. And as a broker, it's actually pretty fun to kind of look at the businesses that you're selling domains to and kind of get to see the inner workings and learn more about those types of businesses as you discuss with them.
Brian, did you have some thoughts?
I mean, I think it's interesting how, I would say typically financial institutions, doctors, they're not as keen, but it is interesting. Yet, yesterday I was looking into a domain for somebody as a premium domain, and it's owned by a very large bank. And it's interesting how a lot of times, companies end up with these great domains, through acquiring businesses, right? And so these domains kind of just sit there and they don't really have a use for them. So, a lot of times being able to pierce through to some of those companies and help them understand, like, look, this is something that's on your books that you can turn into cash that you're not really using. And so yeah, like Michael said, it's, every domain is just a new adventure. And I think every domain that we broker feels just as good as the one before, regardless of the sale size. And we just closed on a domain this week actually that we'd met the buyer at a NamesCon and just been back and forth over the last 6 months, and so it's just all the things that go into getting a deal done. Some are super quick and easy, and then others take time. And I think it's just being patient, but also looking for the tell signs along the way. And I think that's the big thing too, is just following up with the deal, not letting it sit so that way it stays top of mind for the people involved, but just being willing to be patient. I mean, so many times it's amazing just what shows up in our inbox, something we were working on 6 months ago that we thought was kind of a cold lead, and now they circle back. And so those are always fun to get, and makes it for a super interesting and exciting career for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. So when I think when we talk about domains, I typically just default to like premium, generic, one or two word domain names. But what about brandable domains? I know that's important to a lot of companies. How do you guide or how do you consult your customers on brandable domains?
Brandable names that, they're tricky because there might only be one potential end user for that name. A lot of times if it's a made up word and you Google it, you can see that maybe there's one or two small companies with that as a name. And a lot of times they're probably fairly small. Usually your best buyers for those types of names that are going to pay up a lot, they're going to emerge without you even knowing it, that it's probably not who you think it is. So I think just by having a landing page on it, just saying that hey, look, the domain is for sale, it's available, get in touch, make yourself easy to get in contact with. I think that's a good way. We get requests to push out brandable names or kind of made up words quite often. But we have to just be honest with the seller and tell them like, look, um, it's probably maybe not the best use of our time to try and outbound that kind of name, especially if you're wanting $50,000 or $100,000 and there's a couple coffee shops using that kind of name or something small. So that's kind of my thoughts on brandables. I like them as domain investments, but yeah, you got to be careful and you got to be really patient with those types of names.
Yeah. And I would add too, I think, our mentality is we want to, really solidify ourselves as somebody that, gives a different perspective of the way they're looking at this. So for example, even when they get, help them acquire a domain, or if one's too expensive, we love giving them other options and seeing what's out there. A lot of times, hey, if we say, hey, look, here's a domain that's available, for $12 on GoDaddy, you should buy this. And we're really helping them build a digital fortress around, this domain that they're investing in. So sometimes, picking up maybe the plural makes sense, or hey, should we get these other extensions? Well, depending on the price. So really just kind of being an advisor in that way so that they're not spending too much on things that really they don't need to spend money on, or hey, here's one specific domain that would really make sense that, helps you pass the radio test. Let's get this other alternate spelling. So I think really coming at it from that angle helps establish trust as well, and them knowing that look, you're here for their long-term partner, not just here to make a buck on a domain transaction.
Yeah, yeah. So some of my biggest learnings have come from mistakes that I've made in domain investing. They're hard lessons, but they're the lessons you remember. What are some of the mistakes you've seen people make in domain investing, and how can we avoid those same mistakes?
Yeah, I think that well, you hear it all the time. Seasoned domain investors will get on a podcast or on the show and they'll bang the table like, don't buy a lot of domains until you've properly educated yourself. And it's true. There's a ton of educational material out there right now. You have Domain Sherpa, DN Academy, and the data that you can pull right now, Name Bio, Crunch ID, listen to Sully's podcast. There's just so much out there. So you really shouldn't go into domain investing blind, but you do need to go get your hands dirty. You're going to make mistakes, and you kind of got to learn from those mistakes. But you want to minimize them as well. So education is key. And then I think another thing, and it probably held me back for a while, is that I see with domain investors is confirmation bias. You fall in love with what you buy, and then you only want to hear the good things about it and the positive aspects about the domain. You talk about those things, but you don't want to look at the red flags or hear conflicting evidence about what could be a potential issue with it. So I think that that's where a lot of domain investors get stuck. And I think it's really important just to zoom out and look at the domain business and understand there's hundreds of millions of domains that are floating around out there, and really only a small percentage of those is ever going to sell for a meaningful price. So I think that's key.
Right. Overall, what would be your advice to entrepreneurs and startups looking to secure like that perfect name for their business?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think start the process now. If there's a domain that you really want, just start the process of looking into it, see what it's selling for. I think a lot of times people wait, like, oh, well, I'll wait till I get the money for it. But there's a lot of creative ways to be able to buy a domain with lease to owns and everything else. So I think get the process started now. Early often. I think one of the benefits too, and this kind of goes with domain investing, is that Michael said a lot of people have domains that they just keep paying renewals on just because they always have.
Right.
But you really have to think of it like, hey, if I drop these 1,000 names, it's also saving you 10 grand. And, none of these are really get you excited about selling them. But I think also what makes it effective as a domain investor is having other people that you talk to and, hey, get somebody else with a different perspective. Hey, look at my portfolio and tell me objectively what you think is trash, right? And I think that's what's really effective about working with a team at Grip Brokerage. It's like a lot of times I have an opinion on something and I'll get Michael's opinion and he, gives a different perspective and vice versa. Or I think it's worth this much. He thinks it's worth that much. And so being able to bounce ideas off other people and, getting Tessa Marine's feedback. And so that's really helpful because it also gives you a little bit more of a full picture than just looking at it through your tunnel vision. So I think, companies aligning themselves with good domain brokers that they can, help them kind of secure those assets along the way, but also help coach them and guide them and connect them. And hey, here are some other assets that you need to kind of help build this digital fortress of what you're doing with your brand. So just work with people that kind of specialize in what we do when it comes to domains.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you coming on and talking through things with me. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
I could shout out just one organization that I think does a lot for the domain business and they're helping push forward is the ICA. I always like to give them a little airtime. I think that they're a great organization that advocates for the rights of domain owners. And so if you own a domain or you are a domain investor, I think it's important to maybe check them out. They're on internetcommerce.org and they're putting on events right now, as well as like monthly AMAs. So there's a lot of education going on at the ICA as well. And then a plug for us, I'd say check out our newsletter. If you're not getting it already, you can sign up on our website, gritbrokerage.com, or you can check out gritbrokerage.net to see some of our recent newsletters.
Just people, getting involved in the industry, like Michael said, just, going on a domain cruise, however many years ago, right? Just going to that first convention, getting involved in a forum, watching some podcasts and training. There's, my son is actually going through Domain Name Academy right now. So yesterday he was learning about, hey, Dad, does this domain pass the radio test? And I think just kind of educating people on the domain industry and just having conversations with people. This is kind of a neat full circle story, but we were at NamesCon and a buddy of mine I've known for, probably 20 years has an office right there where we're having NamesCon, totally unrelated to the domain business. He just runs like a coach tube company. And but he owns some premium domains. And so we had a chance to see each other. He met Michael and but he called me up randomly about 2 weeks ago and said, hey, what's going on? Just checking in. And he said, I've got a buddy actually trying to get a domain name. Can you help him? And so we actually helped get the deal done, just closed on it. And turns out it was, we helped him buy jesser.com, which there's a big YouTube guy at Jesser on YouTube with like 20 million followers. So it's just kind of cool. Like here's a buddy I haven't seen in forever that has a friend that needs a domain.
Right.
And we help get it done. And it's amazing just how, being involved in the industry, you can, sometimes walk into a deal or using your information to help somebody else with something that they really need. And so I think, the more things there are involved like this for people to get involved and you even remotely have an interest in domains, go ahead and jump in and go through Domain Name Academy or something and just start to learn more about it. And it really is a fascinating industry. And all of us, almost all, started part-time. So
right.
that's kind of a neat thing before you end up flipping full-time into it.
Thanks again, guys. I appreciate your time. And thanks for being a part of the show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks, Sully, for all you do for the industry and great being on with you.